The future of finance or a forgettable fad? Digital assets like Bitcoin are divisive, but they have also made some of their founders and early investors incredibly rich. This series gives you the chance to hear from some of the most influential people in the crypto world. In this episode, you'll hear from the co-founder of Ethereum, Charles Hoskinson. In an earlier episode, he explained the process of developing one of the world's most important cryptocurrencies. And in this one, he's going to talk more about their future. But first, let's define what an ICO is. The letters stand for Initial Coin Offering, which is the process by which issuers exchange cryptocurrency for funding. The underlying projects themselves can be literally anything, although in the US, the SEC has begun to weigh in on where issuers may run afoul of existing securities laws. So how can cryptocurrency revolutionize the way we use money? Let's find out what Charles Hoskinson has to say about the future.
If you look at how natural gas or oil or gold or any commodity is treated in the Western world, these are, very competitive, reasonable markets, and people have an expectation that there should be a fair value for what they're extracting, and that's somewhat predictable. But if you go to the developing world where they don't have the expertise, the credibility, the infrastructure, and other such things to actually develop their resources, for example, Guinea with its bauxite has nearly a third of the world's supply of bauxite. What they end up having to do is go to China or to Rio Tinto or these other firms and make very predatory deals where they get pennies on the dollar for these natural resources. And they accept bribes or they accept some infrastructure play. But at the end of the day, they're literally selling something that could be worth $100 for $1 or less. So what if you could actually tokenize the development of natural resources? So you say something like, okay, we're going to survey this field for oil, or we're going to survey this field for bauxite or for diamonds. And then we're going to tokenize the entire production, and each token represents some ownership stake of that. Now, this kind of a way of going about things is not completely new. It's been proposed before, but now because of all these tools and cool things that we're getting in the cryptocurrency space, it gives us many more levers that we can pull to prevent corruption and to prevent theft or other such things from occurring, or cut off the flow of capital in the event that an agency failure occurs, even on the government side, perhaps. So this will allow smaller jurisdictions that really do want to compete on the global markets to actually get a fair price for their resources, which in turn they can use to reinvest in the community. As a corollary to that, if you look at infrastructure, for example, energy, water, all of these types of things, we're moving from a centralized model to a more decentralized model. It wasn't too long ago that Tesla announced the solar roof, and then before that, the Powerwall. But basically what they're doing is proposing a decentralized grid. So wouldn't it be a wonderful world to say, instead of having to build a $50 million or $100 million power plant to go provide energy for people in Ghana or people in Nigeria, for example, why don't we instead build a solar grid or a wind grid and have that be community owned? And these tokens actually represent ownership of that grid, and they can be ICO'd. So everybody in the world can now make money from a Ghanaian energy farm that's providing cheap, clean power to people in this jurisdiction. Or if we talk about, for example, foreign aid, instead of saying we're going to just give all this foreign aid to some hegemony in the country and hope they do a good job, foreign aid can now actually be participating on the open markets. The UN, for example, could buy some of these tokens in order to promote the development of water and promote the development of solar and actually get a return on these tokens. These are like new opportunities that are incredibly exciting to me, and they can do everything from creating a decentralized internet via meshnet to things like utility services to the tokenization of natural resources. And I think this is going to be one of the great fun challenges to explore over the next 10 or 20 years as this technology matures. My great hope for cryptocurrency technology is that we stop talking about blockchain and Bitcoin and all of these things. We no longer talk about TCP/IP in the general public. In the early days of the internet, the only people who used it were very sophisticated, very technical people, and they were capable of doing so much. And that was because the internet could do so little, and they had to carry the load for them. So things like TCP/IP and these ideas, they kind of faded into the backdrop. They're necessary, they're useful. Technologists iterate and evolve and build things on top of them. But at the end of the day, the consumer doesn't care. The consumer looks at things like, does my Skype work or not? Am I having a good high quality call, or is it crackly and there's high latency or something like that? If we can achieve the same thing we've achieved with the internet, that it just works, and it just works well, but do that for money, then I think we can have some really magical, revolutionary things. For example, I believe we'll have this idea of a universal wallet. Just recently, I was actually on a trip throughout Europe. I was in Ukraine, I was in Greece, I was in Switzerland, and I was in London, in England. And all these countries have one thing in common, which is they have different money. So Ukraine's money is different than the euro, which is Greece's money, is different from the franc, which is Switzerland's money, which is the pound, which is England's money. But I never once used a currency exchange, and I never once used the local money. I had my card, and every time I bought something, that card would go from US dollars to the local currency. So I actually didn't care what the local currency was. I just had to kind of in the back of my mind track what am I spending. So could you imagine a future where all of your assets live in a wallet, a digital wallet, where you have some tokenized gold and tokenized stock, but even more exotic things like tokenized airline miles, or maybe you tokenize your house and sell part of it. It's like a reverse mortgage and you have some tokens in there. Maybe you pre-sell your labor. You put it there. And then when you go into Starbucks or to McDonald's or any of these places, they always will charge, let's say, in dollars. So when you go and tap your cell phone to pay, you're going to pay in airline miles or your labor or your house, and they get dollars. They didn't know that you paid in airline miles. That's some decentralized market-making network took care of all that process. Now, if we can get to that reality, we start caring a lot less about our local money. It doesn't really matter if you live in Argentina and the peso is not doing so good, because you can just rebalance your portfolio and say, I'm actually pretty long on the dollar. I'm just going to go for that. Or I like gold, so I'm going to store all my wealth there. So now what we've done is we have taken a person where their financial life is determined by geography, and we've now put them in the driver's seat of their financial life. They get to make the final say about their portfolio and how they store their assets. And by the way, every single one of these assets are going to be secure. They're going to be well accounted for. They're going to be free of fraud or a lot more resistant to fraud. They're going to move at the speed of light. You're going to be able to buy and sell them at a fair price. And there's no longer a siloing effect that occurs where your equities live here and your bonds live here and your currencies live there and your commodities live there. They're all just treated as the same under the same type of protocol, and they flow just as fast as email. If we can accomplish that by 2030, I think that the cryptocurrencies will have become the greatest innovation of the last 500 to 1,000 years since the invention of banking and the invention of the printing press. And that'd just be an amazing future to live in.
So Charles Hoskinson sees a bright future for cryptocurrency on the horizon. He envisions a world where virtually anyone can tokenize anything, including natural resources. As an example, local issuers with limited access to capital, perhaps somewhere in the developing world, could fund a solar-based power grid to power their very own community. Another use case is the digital wallet, where users could tokenize such assets as airline miles or gold. These tokens can then be given liquidity and traded with low transaction costs and low frictions, and in addition, reduced risk of fraud. In Charles's view, we are clearly still at the very beginning of the digital asset revolution. In order to find out what's next in the space, we'll all need to stay tuned. For Real Vision, I'm Ash Bennington.